Very fortunate to have with us Judge David Nuepert, and he's going to be speaking to us, as Mark said, concerning therapeutic mental health court. David was elected as District Court 1 judge in 2018. Prior to being elected, Dave served as in-house legal counsel for Peninsula Housing Authority, following 20 years in private practice in Clallam and Jefferson counties. Before that, Dave was the administrator of the Clallam Jefferson Public Defender's Office, and he also served as a district court judge pro tem and court commissioner from 1997 to 2018. So as you can see, he was eminently qualified for his current position with all that experience. Previously, he was a board member for Peninsula Behavioral Health, and he is currently active in the Therapeutic Courts Committee with the statewide District Court Judges Association. And with that, I hand it over to Dave. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Laura. Well, I appreciate the introduction, and it's nice to see friends again. And I appreciate you speaking to my involvement. It's not all about looking back, but I do have a long history here, and I'll go ahead and point out that I'm wearing a jacket this morning that I got from the Toggery, and I'm happy to say that there's right. It's stood the test of time, but I'm equally happy that it still fits as long as I've had it. So I wanted to share that, and I'm happy about that my jacket fits. So there's 5 for me too for the happy bucket. And when I get started talking about the therapeutic court, it's helpful for me and whoever's hosting the meeting, if we can share. I do have a PowerPoint that I'll attempt to get on. And if I get stuck running it, I hope we still have 1 or 2 of our middle school students available to coach me through how to get it to work. Okay. So
I'll get you set up here, Dave. Give me a sec.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it very much. Of course.
Forgot to do that. I got sidetracked with being the.
But it's to acquaint you with district court, who we are and what we do, and then to segue from that introduction into the specifics about the therapeutic mental health court. With thanks also to Prosecutor Mark Nichols for providing some slides that I'll be sharing with you as well this morning. And the Clallam District Court 1, the area for this court is from the county line on the east to approximately Joyce north on the west side, and that takes in District 1. And are we?
You should be able to share it now, yeah, if you go into your screen. Yep.
Well, all right, so, okay, where are we here? Let's try that. Is anything showing up yet? I sometimes have a bit of a challenge here.
Yep, it's working.
Is it? Okay, you got slides up there. It's glad to see Mr. Murphy's participating as well. Patrick Murphy is a deputy prosecutor who appears in this court, very tech savvy, very knowledgeable about the law as well, of course, but has helped me with this before. So let's get going here. So there's the courthouse. And I'm actually in that upper right-hand window. They're waving a little bit there, but we do have a mission statement for District Court 1. Because of the volume of cases that we bring in and the types of cases that we bring in, we want to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of folks participating in the court and also, of course, to the community. So with that in mind, our mission is to make sure we have access to the court in a way that we can get cases resolved timely, impartial, efficient manner. Certainly that's been a challenge with everything that's been going on since March of last year. I'll point out that we are intending fully to resume jury trials starting on March 31st after a hiatus of several weeks. The types of cases that we get involved with are criminal cases. The limit that I have here is for gross misdemeanors, and the maximum sentence for those you can see right there. And everything above that would be charged likely as a felony in the Superior Court. And some of the most serious cases that we see involve DUI, alcohol and or drugs, assault, harassment, domestic violence cases are of particular import in the court and how we can respond well to those. And then there's a variety of other cases we hear here as well that you can see. How a criminal case gets started briefly. There's a complaint made. Somebody contacts the police to report either a crime occurring, what they thought was a crime occurring. There's a law enforcement response to that. There may be a search warrant request made. And that's when I get involved on occasion, usually sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning for a call. And that proves to be evidence of the saying that nothing good happens after midnight, just outside. So that's a way of developing a case. Then a case is filed. Either the police file it with the court and book the person into jail, or it's sent over to Mark's office for a review and a decision to be made what and if a charge should be made. Then the person is summoned into court and required to appear, at which time they're advised of their rights, including the right to counsel. And then when I first see somebody in court, then I usually set conditions on their release, which include in alcohol-related driving offenses, a sobriety monitoring program available through the administration of the sheriff's office, where folks test every day for the presence of alcohol. And if they test positive on that, then there's consequences for that. Once a case works its way through our system, the outcomes generally are either a guilty plea, a dismissal, or a trial. But we're looking today at an exception to one of those 3 predictable outcomes. And then after somebody is sentenced, they remain under supervision of the court, either on a court supervised probation or direct supervision through the probation department here. And we have 2 folks doing probation office work here as well. It's not only criminal cases we hear in the district court. In fact, we have more civil cases filed every year than we do criminal cases. I hear small claims cases, and that's really people's court because they come in and represent themselves. And that's usually a dispute, certainly over an amount claimed to be owed by somebody to somebody. So to try to kind of reduce the level of conflict, we let folks go to mediation first. To try to work it out with a representative from Peninsula Dispute Resolution Center. That worked well. It doesn't work in every case, doesn't need to work in every case. Some cases just need to be tried, but that does allow folks to settle their cases if they wish to. Above that, when I hear lawsuits, I can hear cases involving claims up to $100,000. And there's a list there of the types of cases that I may hear. And infractions, anybody who's gotten a ticket knows that involves the district court. And quite often folks come into court, and with Zoom, we've been able to hear actually more cases to make that a convenience for folks to appear, at least for in some cases by Zoom. Other ones, they're required to appear in person, and we've been able to manage the crowd flow, I think, pretty well. Other cases involve protection orders, name changes. And on the bottom there, I'm not going to let the lawyers guess, but if anybody knows what replevin is, it's another 5 from me into the happy bucket. Okay, any takers? No? Okay. Replevin involves an action when somebody is holding somebody else's personal property and you want to get your stuff back, then you file a case in the district court, and that's an action in replevin. Should probably be called recovery, but you know, that puts more of the guesswork into it. So that's generally the sorts of cases that I hear. But what I'm particularly enthusiastic about this morning is establishing a mental health court, and for that to be administered through District Court 1. And these are slides that Mark was generous enough to allow me to share with you today. And you can see there that mental health courts are authorized throughout the state. And there are, I believe by last count, 17 of them currently in operation. A number of those are available through district courts, some through the Superior Court. It's not too much of a concern which court manages it, as long as it's managed well and efficiently and effectively. So the therapeutic courts generally, you may be familiar with Clallam County's drug court or juvenile drug court, the lift court, which helps families gain services. Those are examples of therapeutic courts that are operating locally. And the mental health court, I believe we've certainly established a need for that to, again, the whole point of this, folks, is to reduce recidivism. That will help reduce jail costs and to have manageable outcomes where folks who are already in our community are going to be able to gain the services they need to function better in our community. And I'm not going to lecture Nor'Wester Rotary on the importance of community. I'm humbled when I consider the projects that Nor'Wester Rotary has championed in this community and done successfully. And that's a good example, because who thought we would need a dream playground, for example? You know, there's slides all over town. Right. But it, you know, never hurts to have a A+ effort and to be able to see that result, and that sort of work, how it strengthens the community. So in a therapeutic court, such as the mental health court, we do need the participation of the prosecuting attorney's office. And I have been meeting regularly with Mark Nichols and with Wendy Sisk from Peninsula Behavioral Health, service provider in the community as well, to try to build the core design for this court and to expand on the planning of that so that we can get going sooner rather than later. But mental health courts are kind of an expansion on the model for drug courts. And as you see there, it's overrepresentation of people with mental illness in the criminal justice system. And I can assure you from the bench, I see lots of folks over and over again, folks who are reoffending, rearrested, rejailed, back in court again, sometimes on offenses such as trespassing, shoplifting, even more serious charges, certainly assault and harassment, where it's really clear that they present with behavioral health issues. And if we can get to the core of that, the mental health issues, in most cases, it's shown by these therapeutic courts that they work effectively. And the drug court here in Clallam County is a good example of how we've been able to build a therapeutic court here locally that's been responsive to our needs here and to manage that effectively. And there's no reason we can't do that with a mental health court. And Laurel mentioned that I'm on the committee, Therapeutic Courts Committee, with our Statewide Judges Association. And from there, I've learned so much and have been able to get a lot of ideas on what works, what hasn't worked for other jurisdictions. And as far as I know, no county that has started a mental health court has decided to discontinue it. In fact, they usually expand on that success. You start small and build from that. So this is where folks who present with a diagnosable mental health issue who appear to be amenable to treatment and are willing to get treatment in order to reduce that risk of reoffending. And as you see there on the slide, it's mental health courts are voluntary. That gives folks a motivation. The model we're looking at here is accepting folks into the mental health court after they have been charged with a crime, but in most cases before they have been convicted of that crime. My experience, that gives people a good incentive to work the program. And if the program works, then they are able to avoid having yet another conviction on their records. So for the Clallam County Mental Health Court, as you see there, the home court for that is going to be here, District Court 1, starting this year is our goal. And we will probably start out with 8 to 10 to 12 people, somewhere in that range. And typically a person will spend 12 to 24 months, average of 18, in a mental health court. And that's a long time for a lot of folks, but they can gain some confidence and understanding of what it takes to stick to a program and to get through it satisfactorily. And then that's what I mentioned about pre-adjudication status there as well. So it's really a team approach here. It's not entirely top down. Certainly you need somebody in the position of authority, and that's the judge in the court, to be able to maintain order and use progressive discipline if it's needed. And a lot of times what you see with these therapeutic courts is when folks are doing well, as many times as they've appeared in front of a judge during their lives, juvenile court, superior court, district court, rare is the time that they've gotten some kind of positive affirmation from the judge. And folks respond well to that. And if they have the opportunity to hear that, that's something that they can build on. And I'll give you another example of that with this 24/7 sobriety monitoring program. When folks are going into the jail, for example, twice a day at the sheriff's office to administer a breath test to make sure that they're not testing positive for alcohol. After they get at that for a few days, the people that run that program, they're smart. And they'll tell people, for example, you're doing well, you know, you haven't tested positive in a week now or 2 weeks now. How do you feel about that? Keep up the good work. And for some folks, you know, I get that they're charged and they're going to be accountable in the district court, certainly. But that kind of affirmation can go a long way, especially when they've not heard that from that level of authority before. So just a side example of how that sort of involvement can work and what this team involvement is about. So there is a drug court coordinator, somebody who's involved perhaps with our program in helping to design the program. Ideally, that could be somebody who has current experience with therapeutic court models. Prosecuting attorney's office, we need their involvement. We need the involvement of the public defender's office. And I feel confident about that. As Laurel pointed out, I was the administrator of that. It was back before the turn of the century. This century, by the way, but it was before the turn of the century. And then I was fortunate enough to be involved in the board for the public defender's office for many years after that. So I have a sense of how that works as well. And also for how the mental health providers will view this through working with Peninsula Behavioral Health for a good number of years as well. So the treatment community typically organizes well around therapeutic courts because a lot of times it's the same clientele that they're already serving. And we know that it works. Again, an example of that is how things have been working in the drug court, having that team approach to it. We are experiencing support from local law enforcement, the elected sheriff of the county, and then the chiefs of police for Port Angeles, SQUEM, have expressed certainly an interest in it. So nobody said no yet. You know, we're going to hear some questions about it, and that's fine. We welcome questions because we want to be responsive to what concerns folks have. And of course, it does require participation by folks that have been charged with crimes. New programs cost money, certainly. So the question I get a lot is, well, Dave, how are we going to pay for this? And there is a source of funds available. Locally, the commissioners had adopted a 0.1% sales tax in, as you see there, 2006. And that is a local option sales tax that is designed quite specifically to support therapeutic courts and then treatment providers and other aspects of treatment, not just mental health treatment, but it does apply to a mental health court. And with the economy picking up speed again, and with demand increasing, we would anticipate that sales tax locally is going to increase as well, so that there would be additional funds becoming available. But the possibilities for funding would be utilizing local option sales tax, not at the expense of other recipients of funding from that program. Because there are other programs now that are working well, and we intend to just leave them alone and let them keep working, and to work with us in this court as well. So it's not at the expense of other recipients of funds from that local option sales tax. There are grants available. In fact, at our most recent planning meeting, we were discussing in detail a grant application for federal funding that would be available for 5 years, and that would help a lot in getting startup costs and operation costs met as well. And the least likely option, least attractive option, would be going to the county general fund for funding for the district court. And we do not have the ability to charge participants for going through the mental health court to try to recover cost. So that tells a little bit more about what the court is involved with. And that's, I'm going to get to my end slide there, but I'm not there yet. And I'm glad that Sherry Tinker's here this morning as well. And when Sherry joins Nor'Wester, that's good for everybody. And I know Sherry especially well through my work with the Housing Authority, because Sherry is a Housing Authority commissioner, and somebody who really understands that sense of community and how to build community, because a lot of these folks that would be coming into the mental health court, they're going to need housing as well. And with the Housing Authority, and I'm not saying that they're going to be providing housing, although that we're not going to ignore that as a possibility. But they had a program when they redeveloped what's known as Seaview Ridge up there, the projects off of Lauritsen Boulevard, right next to the Boys and Girls Club. Developed housing available for families who have been chronically homeless. And the way that folks would gain housing through that program was they would essentially be nominated by an agency who would also describe the plan of services, so that folks were going into housing, but they're going into housing with an established plan for mental health or drug addiction, alcoholism, whatever is going to address the underlying cause of the homelessness, apart from poverty, perhaps. And that program's worked pretty well too, because it's transitional in the sense that once folks learn how they can live and manage a household, then they're able to kind of graduate from that. And if they have employment, then they can get into another program like a Section 8 housing, something along those lines. And again, I want to point out to Sherry through her work with Sarge's Place that we do anticipate that we will be able to serve veterans through the mental health court. Clallam County has the highest per capita rate of veterans of any county in the state. And that's been true since the Vietnam era, when folks have moved here after their service and have continued to do that. And you look at what a important aspect of the community our veteran population is. And as Mark Nichols has pointed out in several of the meetings that I've attended with him, areas that have a separate standalone veterans court, those are therapeutic courts, but a separate veterans court most often grew out of a mental health court program. where veterans became involved and there was enough participation that it justified like spinning it off into its own court. That implicates other funding sources as well. And Mark has done outreach to find out that we have for our community assigned a veteran services coordinator. That's not the exact title, but who has shown interest in this program. And that's a good resource for us going forward. So again, we don't want to overlook the opportunity to serve veterans through this court. So, you know, that's part of who we are and what we do in the district court. And I certainly appreciate your time and interest in the district court and our mental health court plan. And you're certainly welcome to stop by and visit at the district court. And I'll fully expect you to do that when you get your jury summons in the mail. And yeah, what's the best excuse for getting out of jury duty? There isn't one. And we've noticed that folks are now, when they got their summonses, they want to make sure there's going to be a trial, if there's going to be, because they really want to get that involvement. And it's an important thing. But we do all of that in person. We're not doing any of our trials by Zoom. And so that's kind of, that's the outline and overview of district court, therapeutic courts, and the specifics about the mental health court design for Nor'wester Rotary. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to hear them. And Mark, you could jump in and respond as well, since it's to Mark Nichols' credit. He's been working on getting a mental health court established in this county well before I was chosen to serve as the elected judge of this district. And when I was approached to ask, you know, would you be interested in having the district court sponsor this? You know, both hands went up. But the reason for that is that so much thought and planning had gone into it from the prosecuting attorney's office. Good. Well, that's enough for me. What do you want to know?
I have a question. You were speaking to costs a while back, and that's certainly important in light of what Mark shared with us about that pending legislation about doing away with previous possession stuff. Anyway, so what my question is would one area of savings be that this would have a positive effect on the level of jail populations?
Yes, Laurel, it should, because so many folks are coming through the district court system and the Superior Court felony system as well, repeat offenders. And a lot of times those folks get booked into jail either on new charges or a combination of a new charge and a warrant, and they're held, and jail costs are high. Sheriff Benedict and Chief Wendy Peterson do an excellent job of managing the jail and doing it efficiently. But, you know, it would have the effect of reducing that when it works successfully to keep folks from reoffending.
So essentially, in addition to being a human saving process, this is also a revenue saving process.
It's that's a good way of looking at it, because you know, especially during times of crisis like this, you got to look at the expense side, right? Because revenue, sure, you're hang in there and that's going to pick up. But on the expense side, that is a way to look to reduce those costs, because there are people that belong in jail, and that's where they're going to be until their case gets resolved. But not everybody who's in there necessarily needs to be there if there's an alternative. And if that alternative can run at lesser expense and keeping somebody just confined.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave, in the chat, there was a question that said, how did your time serving on the PBH board form your opinion about the efficacy of this program?
Thanks, Kathy, appreciate it. Having the understanding and gaining the information about treatment providers in this community. And I served on that board with Grant, and he could jump in here at any time and finish my sentence for me eloquently. Because when you're involved with PBH, either as a consumer, because we all know somebody, either who has gotten help for mental health or could use it. But my involvement with PBH has led me to gain an understanding of the resources we have available in the community, Kathy, that are right here. And it's not a matter of needing to set those up as a new program. And PBH does, by my estimation, a wonderful job with the folks that come in, and they understand the billing process, and they work really well. You should see the new facility up there, right off 8th and Lincoln. It's first rate.
So I'm going to segue a little bit off of that
Sure.
with another question, and we'll keep monitoring the chat for other
Yeah,
people
very
who have questions too. What can you paint a picture of the type of person that would come to your court, the types of issues that they would have? You've touched on them some, but I would like to get a clear picture of the person who would be coming to your court and receive what type of assistance.
Okay, I saw such a person just this week. As I was going through the slides, I told you that I do anti-harassment cases. Those are protection orders, civil protection orders. And I had a case where a person filed for a restraining order against another person, I think a neighbor. And I heard that case in court, and the fellow who was charged with civilly accused of harassing the other person came to court and agreed to entry of a protection order. And when it links to apologize for his behavior and explained that he was, I think he said bipolar, but had stopped taking his medication, and the way I read the reports in it was delusional when he contacted this person who, you know, very much deserved to have a protection order in place. And I believe that that person who was there on that anti-harassment order also subsequently was criminally charged as well. And there's a basis for that on his behavior, because he was really acting out. And it's not an excuse, you know, it may be an explanation. But in the district court, we talk so much about accountability and the importance of relationships. So that person with that insight, when he came into court, and he presented pretty well when he was in front of me. Most folks at least try to do that and be on their best behavior. But there's a person who, if they're charged, it might be an option for them, not immediately. But that's an example of the type of case, Kathy, that comes through the district court where there's involvement with the civil side, but then ultimately on the criminal side as well, where somebody could, you know, for a period of time, a year perhaps, participate in treatment. And then we keep close tabs on them to make sure that they're not reoffending during that time. And that's just the example that came to mind, because that's a fellow that I saw earlier this week. There's others, but that's what I thought of first.
Thank you.
Judge Nuepert?
Yes.
Yeah, first off, Brian, thanks for starting the meeting off. I was running a tad late myself. So Brian, thanks for doing that. Judge, I'm just curious on during the COVID, how did you do your trials? I'm just out of curiosity.
Well, bench trials, I'm able to hear in person, but jury trials, we actually suspended those for a period of time. And so we didn't bring juries in. And that was at the direction of the state Supreme Court that put out an order that put a halt to those proceedings. And then in the end of July, we were able to resume jury trials again. And we were doing those in person.
Okay.
We can do that a little bit more readily than the other court can, because our jurors it's a 6-person jury. So we don't need to bring in the volume of folks that the Superior Court does typically to get a jury picked in there. And then Dr. Barry, the county health officer, has been up to the district court 2 or 3 times to do a walkthrough and make recommendations on best practices. So we've certainly adhered to those with social distancing, mask wearing, we've got hand sanitizer and gloves available. What's kind of become routine for us these days, we make those available for folks coming in, because I still want it to be more risky driving to the courthouse than it is having any sort of experience in the courthouse.
Right. Okay.
Don't mean to sound cynical that way, but
Right.
that's what we're looking at. So yeah, we've been able to do it. A lot of other hearings by Zoom, certainly, but juries, we need folks here.
Right.
I have a question again. There's a certain slice of public opinion that asserts that justice should be punitive before anything else, or at least to do with retribution and consequences.
Mhm.
And that slice of public opinion tends to view therapeutic courts as soft and enabling. What would you say to a person who asserted that to you?
Well, I can say, you know, if you're walking around downtown and you're crossing the street to avoid somebody, there may be a reason for that, and that may be the sort of person who is going to respond through a district court program where you can, you know, walk on either side of the block that you would want to. And as far as making life easier for people, I get that, Laurel, because it's like, you know, well, why are we rewarding people for bad behavior? We're not. When somebody usually comes through the court system, they get punishment, and it's a progressive amount of punishment. And in my court, it's up to 364 days in jail that somebody could receive. But that alone does not always effectively cause somebody to stop and think about what they're doing, especially if they don't yet have the means to do that and accept consequences and develop that kind of understanding. So what that does is it helps reduce that cost and you know, improves the community generally, because so many of the folks, I mean, they're already here. You know, this idea that there's busloads of folks being imported here from somewhere else, prove it. This is a homegrown issue, and we can respond to that without just, the goal is not to make life easier for folks or to coddle folks, it's to maintain that accountability. And if they wash out of the program, then the consequences, they'll be swift and certain.
So,
and may I add that I believe it's with compassion. So I'm a therapist, so and Dave, thank you for your kind words, but this 80 to 90% of our clients at our shelter have a mental illness. And most folks in our society, they want to ignore mental illness. And that it's a prevalent issue throughout all of humanity. And it's a chemical imbalance within the brain. And folks will say that person over there, where the reality is it's somebody's cousin, it's somebody's sister, it's somebody's mom. And we need to, if we can look at this in a way where case managers and the courts are working together to try to actually aid the person to get back onto a better path and onto a more holistic lifestyle with consequences, is good, because they can then try to fix what they've done that was wrong, and they can try to get back onto their feet and get back into society in a more holistic way. And a mental illness, a person has to have awareness of their mental illness. And a lot of times folks can have a delusion going on in their minds, and they have no concept that their mentality is broken, fragmented, delusional. And that's a real challenge. And it's most of our clients that have court issues, it is minor infractions. It is small, but then it compounds, and they don't pay fines, and they end up with bench warrants. And that's a huge issue, I'm sure, that you also see within Port Angeles and the Squim area too, you know? So this is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really glad to see that something like this could be happening, because it gets folks out of the jails, and that's a burden for the jails and for the police to be handling all of this as well. To put it back into the hands of some people that know what they're doing in the court system and PBH, because they do a heck of an amazing job there. Bravo to Wendy Sisk.
Made those comments, Sherry, of course. And the newly appointed judge in Forks District Court 2, Bruce Hanafy, I've spoken with a lot about this approach, and he's got full buy-in with it too, I'm happy to say.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You know, this court sounds like it should be characterized as a very wise investment as opposed to a new expense.
That's good, especially when I get to meet with the business community who built this place. It's a good comment.
Judge Nuepert, we really appreciate your service, very much.
Well, it's my privilege. I tell folks I haven't gone to work yet in this job, you know, it's going. I believe in it, and Mark's described me as being passionate about it. Fair enough. I'll take it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your work and investing in the community, Dave. It's excellent and good talk this morning. I'm going to officially adjourn the meeting because it's 8 o'clock and stop the recording, but we can keep chatting for a few minutes.